Good morning. Good morning. I'm very honored to have included our keynote today. With over 31 years of policing experience and having served the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the United Nations, and in current capacity as the Chief of Police for the Halifax Regional Police, it gives me great honor and great pleasure to introduce to you Michel Blais. And without further ado,
Test, test, 1, 2, 3. I just want to confirm so everybody can hear me. That's great. Hopefully there won't be any feedback from this microphone that I'll just put over here. So, premièrement, avant de commencer, il me fait plaisir de vous accueillir ici. Nos amis francophones qui viennent d'autres provinces, alors bienvenue en Acadie néo-écossaise. Alors c'est bel et bien le berceau de l'Acadie et pas trop loin d'ici. Alors donc, bienvenue et bonne journée. So that being done, just let you know, as a bilingual Canadian, I neither master French nor English, so don't be surprised if you hear some strange words come out of me on occasions. I would like to say a couple of things first before I start. Down in front of me right here, and I may reference them a couple of times, are my two heckling tables. These are people with whom I have had the greatest honor of working for the last 6.5 years. I am, as Andrew indicated, the Chief of Halifax Regional Police, but I am so in title only. I'm on pre-retirement leave right now, and that pre-retirement leave ends on next Tuesday, at which point then I will retire after more than 31 years of policing and going on to doing other things. But I would like to recognize the presence of 3 young people here because I think it's so critically important that in our society today that when we encourage these young people, and 2, that we especially recognize women in areas that are non-traditional for women. And those young people are Simran Singh Kaur, Ben Dixon, and Selena Cosma. So folks, you just want to stand up very quickly, and we can have a big hand for these young people here. Thank you very much. You have a seat. So, I am not Clifford Stoll. Right? I saw your tweets yesterday. Holy moly. You know, best keynote ever. The stuff that he was doing, I was talking to the techie guys earlier on, and they were talking about that he actually had the audacity to ask for an overhead projector. Well, if he had had a chance to see his videos, you would have understood what that's all about. So I did ask for one prop. Is here. I promise you I will not be standing on that table. I promise you I will not be standing on a chair. I will be standing here. Clifford, are you in the room today? I think he was saying that he would be. And he said the reason why he runs around the stage and off the stage and everything is because he thinks that everybody in the audience has a tomato ready to throw at him. He doesn't want to stay in one place in order to be a target for them. So I think I might be a bit more amenable to that and be a bit of a target for the next 45 minutes as I talk to you. But nonetheless, I wanted you to know, first and foremost, for those of you who may not be able to see that far away, as you can see, I'm definitely not Clifford Stoll. Right. So with that, as indicated, I am a police chief, I'm a father, I'm a minor hockey referee, as if there's not enough stress in my life. That's something that I enjoy very much, along with my daughter and my son, who do that as well. And I guess you could say that I'm one of the co-recipients, let's see if we got that up there, yes, of the 2019 What the SWAT Award by the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I don't know, is Corey Dr. Owen here? Well, I guess he didn't bring my award, but nonetheless, just to let you know, and for those of you who may not have been aware of it, April 2018, there was a search of a Halifax home following a complaint of a theft of online files from the government of Nova Scotia. And at the heart of the matter was some poor security practices. And the Nova Scotia Public Prosecution Service ended up dropping those charges. This is a cautionary tale about how police sometimes deal with legitimate complaints that they've never dealt with before. We're obliged to investigate, and the various gatekeepers of the judicial system, from the Public Prosecution Service to the defense lawyers and of course to the judges themselves, provide secondary and tertiary layers of protections. Does it always go right? No. But the system pretty well works. And I'll tell you, from my time in the United Nations and 2 years in Haiti and having worked in Colombia and Cuba, I've seen other countries where, unfortunately, their particular systems don't work. And in the case of first-time investigations, response by police can vary from being perceived as being heavy-handed to that of total disinterestment. And especially when it comes to the issue of technology. This is how we as police learn how to do things, and especially how not to do things. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So, we live in a very complex environment, full of ambiguities and contradictions that need to be managed not by simple solutions, but by well-thought-out approaches that require time, effort, money, and especially thought. This is, as you know, a societal effort that is not just from the political or the legal, judicial, policing sphere, but from society as a whole. And as human beings, we're really great at something called post-dicting, after the fact, but we're really lousy at predicting. And we must be cognizant of this very important limitation. In such, we have to be focused on preparation and preparedness as opposed to prediction. The challenges of today and the challenges of the future require us to change how we think. And this is something that we've been working very hard on in Halifax Regional Police. The intuitive approach so popularized by Hollywood and our popular culture makes us see the world as more tidy, simple, predictable, and coherent than it truly is. The illusion that one has understood the past feeds the further illusion that one can predict and control the future. And of course, these illusions are comforting, but they're also very wrong. The British Security Service, MI5, recently stated that the threats of today are diffused, complicated, and unpredictable. Well, for students of history in this room, the question I have for you is the following. When have they never been that? So with that as backdrop, I'd like us to take a look briefly at what is policing. Now, the American view of policing is one of to serve and protect, and we've adopted that to a certain degree here in Canada. But it's a lot more than just that. When I ask people in the room, police officers included, what exactly is policing? They come up with a whole series of things, and they're pretty well all right, cumulatively speaking. But when it comes down to it, the most basic, elementary level of policing is dealing with those problems that people themselves could not, would not, and should not deal with. So in that essence, we are the consummate community problem solvers. We get requests for all types of things. Yes, for crime, but other things such as being locked in a car, having an animal that is locked in a car, and a human. We get requests for noise. We get requests for smoking, especially now with legalization of cannabis. We get all types of requests. Recently, I had a study, two studies done, one in June of 2015, the other in September of 2018, for our integrated emergency services, basically our dispatch center, to take a look at the number of calls, what percentage of calls were not of a crime nature. And it surprised me. I figured it would have been about 60, 70%. 88% of our calls had nothing to do with crime, for many of those things that I indicated earlier on. Now, as police officers, we bring to the table three particular things. One, for every intervention that we come across, we bring specialized training. Two, we bring specialized equipment. You just have to take a look on what our police officers wear today. And three, we bring along specialized authorities. Those authorities give us the right to write tickets, to arrest people, to use force if required, to search places with a judicial authorization. But one thing's for certain, there's also perceptions. And many of these perceptions come about as a result of media. And I'm not slamming traditional or even social media on this one, but it's all part of it. Donuts, friendly, innocuous, inept, abusive, Crimes get solved instantly. I mean, for those of you who are fans, and to be honest with you, I don't really watch much TV, even though I must admit on occasion I do watch The Simpsons. Right? I don't get a chance to watch that much, but from what I've heard on CIS, what's the turnaround for their DNA? 24 hours, even less. For us, when we submit something to the RCMP's crime labs in Ottawa, the DNA turnaround on analysis is usually between 3 and 18 months, depending on the situation. Ballistics are now upwards of 12 months to a year, if I'm not mistaken. 12 months, excuse me, to 18 months. Right? It takes a lot of time. It's very, very different from the perceptions that are out there. To paraphrase the comedian Danny Kaye, and that's of course another generation, I mean, my parents' generation, he said that, and I quote, his favorite position was beside himself, and his favorite sport was jumping to conclusions. So specific to policing today, one of our biggest challenges is dealing with perceptions, both public and individual, very often having little or no basis in fact. Unfortunately, these perceptions have a direct link to public trust. So people's perceptions are indeed their realities, and we have to live with that reality. So what are some of the other realities that other people live and have been living? We've seen it, especially in the last 3 years. Worries about the militarization of policing, abuse of force. The Washington Post has, for the last 4 years, come up with a police shooting database that talks about the number of Americans who have been killed by police officers by shootings. That number usually oscillates just below 1,000 people a year. Okay? And you will appreciate, even by the Washington Post standards, they're stating that it's underreported. So at least 1,000 people die through interactions with police by being shot. That doesn't include the number of individuals who have died in car accidents. Doesn't include the individuals who have died in hand manipulation, haven't died by being struck by a taser, for example, a conducted energy weapon. Right? So you can well appreciate the numbers could be upwards of 1,500, even to 2,000. Now Canada, as you know, is 1/10 the size of the United States. So you figure well, those numbers would be about 100. In Canada, on average, per year, there's about 25 individuals who die in interactions with police. And that's being shot, conducted energy weapons being used, hand manipulation, and transport. There are more police officers in Canada who commit suicide a year than individuals who die in interactions with police. It's a very, very different landscape for many reasons, which I won't get into right now. But I want you to at least be aware of that. And we end up having to deal with that on a regular basis, where people will draw the same parallels and conclusions. I had a university professor a couple of years ago, in fact it was in July of 2015 or 16 if I'm not mistaken, who wrote me a message saying, what are we doing to protect the lives of young black males here in Halifax? And then going on and talking about a litany of incidents that occurred in the States, which I couldn't argue with. 2 days later, 5 police officers were killed in Dallas at a Black Lives Matters rally. I didn't respond to that professor. So what we recognize is that what happens there matters here. And hence, once again, the whole issue about perceptions and dealing with that. So our reality here in Halifax is comparable in some regards, but is very different in others. City of 414,000, we have on average 9 homicides a year. So far this year, and I am touching wood, 0 homicides. Toronto had a record number of homicides last year at 95 homicides, about 7 times the size of Halifax. Many reasons, obviously, in there. One of them just recently was the commemoration of the first anniversary of the, for lack of a better word, the truck runovers that occurred on Yonge Street. But here in Halifax, we have three major problems that we deal with that fuels our call for service. And number three is youth at risk, the challenges that youth have to deal with on a regular basis. Number two is addictions. And the number one challenge that we deal with on a regular basis, day in, day out, that fuels our number of calls for service is mental health calls. We've all heard the challenges that are out there with our health systems that are stretched to the maximum. We're on the front line of dealing with that on a regular basis. It ends up being that now that we are the responders of first resort and not the responders of last resort that we were initially intended to be. We also have to deal with a variant of this that occurs. Luckily, it doesn't occur that often, but when it does, we have to be there. But what do we do when things get increasingly complex, such as in the case of the intersection between criminality and technology? I attended a meeting of the Police Executive Research Forum, which was held in August of last year in Washington, D.C. And it was a whole discussion. There was 15 of us, predominantly chiefs. LAPD was there, Chicago was there, New York PD was there. I was the only Canadian representative there. And the questions asked of us by the RAND Corporation as well as the PERF, Police Executive Research Forum, was what are your priorities in terms of technology and what are your greatest fears? Priorities, I'll touch upon that in a few moments. But the greatest fears was around the Internet of Things. Everything being plugged in, everything being available to people can also be available to the criminals that are out there. But before we get into that, let me step back a bit in time. This year, I don't know if you even recognize it up there, okay? This is my MERS. Okay? I've had this MERS for 27 years. I'll probably have it for another 27 years. It's done me very well. I have to remember that I worked a good portion of my career in Quebec, at Laval, and so this was all the rage back in the 90s. Okay? And I found it's very, very worthwhile for me. Okay? This MERS has a section here for a phone. This is where I kept my Nokia phone, the same phone that my wife had advised me through a text message that the Twin Towers had been attacked on September the 11th, 2001. And back when texting was just starting, and by the way, back then it was for free. A bit like Coke dealers, they wanted to offer it to us for free so that we'd get hooked on it. And we did. But an interesting piece in here, I don't know if you can see it, perhaps my heckling tables can yell it out. What is this? Yes, it's a Palm Pilot PDA, and it even works. Okay? And the reason why it's still in my MERS is because, believe it or not, there's bits of information I've been able to put off onto my computer. The first time I came across a PDA was back in 2000. January 2000, so right after Y2K, a great opportunity to sell lots of computers. Everything was quieting down, and I was the file manager for a major file in Montreal. We were investigating the largest importer of cocaine into Canada. He'd pay off the mafia, he'd pay off the Hells Angels, so he'd be able to import as much cocaine as he wanted to. And we had been, through judicial authorizations, following him and following his contact from Colombia, who, on a Friday, was coming up to meet with him to discuss a major importation of coke. And when I'm talking about major, I'm talking about 2 tons of coke from Colombia. So we had a surveillance team on subject A, who was the Canadian, and as soon as he arrived, we had a surveillance team on subject B, who was the Colombian. And we were following them, we were tracking where they were going, and sure enough, both teams were heading towards the same spot. And that same spot was a Tim Hortons in the West Island of Montreal. And subject A, the Canadian, goes into Tim Hortons, orders a coffee, sits down on tables. And I think we all know those Tim Hortons tables. So it's basically one table here, and it's attached to another separate table here. The Canadian sits at the table here. The Colombian arrives, orders a coffee, doesn't even drink his coffee, and sits right opposite him at another table, as if they don't know one another. We've got undercover teams inside the Tim Hortons, listening, not with any acoustic items, but just with their own ears to what's going on. We've got Hispanophones who are in there because they know that they're going to be speaking in Spanish. They didn't even say a word. What they did was they both pulled out one of these, put it one beside the other, and pressed the button. The Colombian got up. A minute later, he left without touching his coffee. The Canadian sat there, finished his coffee, and then left. And we were left at what the heck happened? And that was it. The Colombian went back to the airport. He stayed in a hotel. The next morning, he took off. And that was it. And we learned afterwards that they had exchanged information about the importation. We had no idea what Bluetooth was at the time. And we certainly had no way of being able to intercept that, let alone explaining it to a judge to be able to obtain that authorization. A month later, still in Montreal, anybody heard of or remember Mafia Boy? A few people there. So Mafia Boy was a young lad from Ile Bizarre, Montreal, the west side of Montreal, who launched a series of highly publicized denial of service attacks in February 2000 against large commercial websites including Yahoo, E-Trade, eBay, CNN, FIFA.com, Amazon, and Dell. He also launched a series of unsuccessful simultaneous attacks against 9 of the 13 root name servers at the time. You will appreciate today with the challenges that we have, back then, cybersecurity was qualified as being essentially an electronic Pearl Harbor. Now, I wasn't working in the unit that did the investigations on him, but I knew the investigators who were there. And I'm not sure that they would have done any investigation or been able to do any investigation had it not been for the assistance and especially the insistence of the FBI. Step a bit further, 2003. I'm now in Winnipeg. I'm in charge of major crimes for the entire province of Manitoba. And I have the Integrated Child Exploitation Unit, basically kiddie porn unit that's answering to me. Right? And it's kiddie porn all day, all the time. And they're working, and it's just incredible to see, even in a province of, I think, about 1.5 million, if not 2 million at the most, that there's so much kiddie porn that's there. And we're not talking about individuals who would go and access individual websites. We're talking about individuals who would collect significant amounts of images, who would share those images, and in some cases would even create their own images. Victims range from 14, 15-year-old boys and girls, all the way down to 3-month-old children. We get this call one day from a landlord who had gone into an apartment. The apartment had been pretty well empty, but the tenants had been paying a lot, and there was a bit of a problem with the heating in the apartment, so he goes in there unannounced, and there's a whole bank of computers in the living room. Nothing else. He calls us up. It's got to be something illicit. Our people get a search warrant, they go in there, they take a look, they check everything out. There's no kiddie porn there. We leave. That night, they move everything out. And we learned afterwards that this was a group that was doing fraud in other countries via the internet. Once again, our tunnel vision wasn't able to see beyond the scourge of child pornography. 2014, a young woman shows up at our headquarters not too far from here, asking for help because she is being cyberbullied by her ex-boyfriend on Facebook. She is met by a Generation X, which I consider to be one of them, okay, investigator, who looks at her, listens to her complaint, writes everything down, and says, well, why don't you just get off of Facebook? That'll solve your problem. And we all know that that will not solve the problem. Okay? We ended up apologizing to her and working very closely with the United States authorities to be able to deal with the individual who was living in Florida. And then finally, in 2015, the Halifax Shopping Center conspiracy to commit mass murder. What it was 3 Columbiners, 1 woman from the States, 2 local, who wanted to shoot up Halifax Shopping Center. They had the guns, they had the means, they had the plans. The one thing they wanted to do is they wanted to do one step better than the Columbiners did. They wanted to videotape everything in high definition and put that up on the internet. Well, take a look what happened just a few weeks ago in Christchurch, New Zealand. Not only did they put it up in high definition on the internet, they did it in real time. These stories are about samples from my own experience of how complex things have become in the last few years. So a lot has changed in the last 2 decades. Who finds what and how? In our information-rich, attention-poor society, the issue is not that we go out to find info, but that through social engineering, the information finds us and influences us. Our personal data today, I would posit, is number 2 in terms of the things that companies want. What they really want is our attention. And because everything that we do is marketable and becoming a commodity, anything of value can and eventually will be the subject of criminal interest. As you know, we're literally submerged by a lot of information. Some of it has value, some of it doesn't. So in today's society, there's 4 words. You've heard VUCA before. Volatile, unpredictable, complex, and asymmetrical. Volatile and symptomatic, well, just have to mention the likes of Trump, Brexit, Putin, Duterte, who wants to send our garbage back to us. And these are only examples of some of the extremism that we're seeing on the political level. Unpredictable and multipolar, and as this extremism accentuates, we see more division and we see less unity. Complex. Yes, things are getting more complex, and you folks know it better than anybody else. And thanks in part to technology. One of the themes I've heard by many people in the talks yesterday, and even this morning with Travis, was, would we be better off had we not had that technology? Perhaps, perhaps not. But one thing's for certain, there's this expectation that technology will solve all of our problems. I think we know a bit different. Asymmetrical and uncertain. Life is asymmetrical. There's no balance there. And because of the rise of technology and the complexity of problems, things are less certain than ever before. And in a world that is complex, with myriad dangers that loom in the future, our short-term tendencies pose a continual threat to our own well-being. And as our attention spans decrease because of an increase of information, the threat is even greater, I'd say. We're constantly looking for certainty in a world of uncertainty. Hence why some people gravitate towards extremist, ideologically based worldviews. And that, of course, affects us in policing. So the top 4 risks in policing, there used to be 3 in my mind. And then we identified another, and we took some steps to deal with that, and I'll talk about you right now. First one is exhibits. For those of you who are local, you know that we've had issues. First off with our drug exhibits, and now with our regular exhibits. Okay? And just let you know, there's not a police service that I know that gets it right perfectly. The smaller police services, yeah, it's really easy. We've got 800 total employees for 414,000 people in the city, and then that doesn't include the RCMP and Halifax District. So we have a lot of exhibits. 20,000 pieces of the exhibits we have are non-drugs. So we have a total of over 100,000 exhibits. 20,000 of those are CDs and DVDs. Can you say cloud solution? Perhaps. We're working on that as well. We also have a significant number of DNA exhibits from crimes that occurred upwards of 30 years ago. And they're on all these fridges and these stand-up freezers that are all alarmed just in case the fridge breaks down. So that's the first one. The second is prisoner care. People are usually in our care for maximum 48 hours, usually for 24 hours. And you'll see on Friday and Saturday night, and I've spent time in our prisoner care facility, where you get young university students who are totally pie-eyed on drugs, alcohol, who are brought in to cool off. It's our responsibility to take care of them, make sure nothing bad happens to them. And unfortunately, things do go wrong. People will aspirate their own vomit, they'll bang their heads, or they may be assaulted by another prisoner. Source handling. We get information from various people on various investigations, and we have to deal with that. Protecting their identity is absolutely key. So what happened in the last few years? We recognize that cyber-enabled risk was a huge risk for us. This is our beautiful City Hall. You see, you just go down Argyle Street down here, and you'll see it. I guarantee you, even though there hasn't been much sun this week, we do get sun here on a regular basis at that. Right? The neat thing about municipal democracy is that, unlike provincial and federal democracy, it's not partisan driven. So you don't have really political parties, at least for the most part, across Nova Scotia and in other municipalities across the country. Of course, at the provincial and the federal levels, it's very different. At the federal level, just recently, the recent government, or the present government rather, came up with their federal budget. And they allocated an additional $22 million for protecting children from sexual exploitation online, $151 million for better disaster management preparation response, and $144 million to protect Canada's critical infrastructure from cyber threats. And it sounds like a lot of money, and it's going to be over several years. But is it really when you're talking about a country of 34 million people? In contrast to the federal budget, which is billions upon billions of dollars, at the municipal level, HRP's budget is only $90 million. That's still a fair amount of chump change, but 92% of that is strictly for pay and benefits. And only 8% of that is for what could be described as being discretionary spending. There's really not that much discretion when it comes down to that. During the last budget deliberations at Halifax Hall in January, I had 2 councillors who voted against the budget. The 14 others voted for it, but 2 voted against it. This is key in my mind. One voted against it because he viewed it as being too much money as police-reported crime has been going down. And the other, because in his estimation, we did not have enough money for cybercrime investigations and cybersecurity. And you know what? They're both correct. Here's a changing face of public safety. We've seen, traditionally, as you'll see up there, since 1992 about, the number of police-reported crimes. Very important that you keep that in mind, police-reported crimes, because not all crimes are reported to police. In fact, I'd have to say it's about a minority of upwards about 30 to 40%. There are certain crimes, such as sexual assault, which are as low as 6-7%. So you can see the pattern, the red line that has been going down to today. But the costs of policing have gone up. And for many reasons. And probably the biggest and most important reason is accountabilities. But that's a discussion for another day. So you'd expect between those 2 lines that you'd have a supposed crime reduction dividend. And that's what one of the councillors was looking at. But has crime truly gone down? As I said before, indeed, police-reported crime has gone down. So let's do an informal survey, shall we, if you don't mind. Okay. And only if you feel comfortable to participate in this. If in the last year you have been the victim of a traditional crime, please raise your hand. So traditional crime being theft of something that you own. I'm talking about specific tangible items of an assault, something broken into a house. And usually it's kind of difficult to see with the lights, but I don't see that many hands, and that's normal. Okay? Because for the most part, it's a very small segment of the population that is victimized by traditional crimes. So that being said, let's ask another question. In the last year, please raise your hand if you've received offers of money from overseas. If you've received email, spam, or malware. If you've been harassed online, and I haven't got any other, okay, if you've had your email account hacked, if your computer has been compromised by a virus, if your credit card number has been stolen, or portions of your identity have been stolen. Okay? And I dare say it's about 80 to 90% of this room, if not 100%, that has gone through that. A 2016 UK study by the RAND Corporation had shown a 100% increase in sales of illicit drugs over the previous 3 years through the dark web alone. Another 2015, the year before, UK study concluded that over 50% of all victims of crime, this is in 2015, resulted from technologically facilitated activities, i.e. the internet and social media. It also demonstrated that 90% of large businesses and 74% of small to medium enterprises had some form of data breach, which was up from the 2014 statistics of 81% and 60% respectively. And so I ask you, has crime truly gone down, or has it simply morphed elsewhere? So these are some of the emergent realities of policing today, and I'm cognizant of time. You can read them up there. Just want to raise a few points to you. One of the issues that we have to deal with is the sheer volume of data collected by our service, and by police services for that matter, across the world. And that's data that is not only in our RMS, but comes from body-worn video, dash cams, CCTVs, phones, and of course social media. As I indicated before, we have 100,000, more than 100,000 pieces of exhibits alone, 20,000 of those being CDs and DVDs. What are other types of technologies that are available to police that would provide data as well? And we don't have many of this in Halifax Regional Police for various reasons, but there's unmanned aircraft systems, i.e. drones, facial recognition, forensic video analysis, body-worn video, automatic license plate readers, and the whole issue around the Internet of Things that are out there. And our biggest issues revolve around antiquated legacy systems, some of which are no longer being maintained by the vendors through regular software updates, as well as unsecured devices, untested backups, and supported by antiquated business continuity plans. And these are the challenges that we have to deal with. Some other emergent realities. There's the whole issue around lawful access. Should police obtain information, should they not? I can tell you that in the 80s I went to McGill and I studied political science. And I studied Soviet studies. Today that would be history, essentially. I went to the Soviet Union on a study tour back in early 1984. And I remember it was around the 3rd of January and I'm standing in Red Square. It's evening, it's crappy weather outside, it's Moscow, okay? And there are light standards about 100 feet apart. And under each light standard there was a police officer. And there was a sign on each light standard to celebrate the new year. And the year was 1984. Talk about being Orwellian. And it was at that point that I said, I don't want to live in a society where you've got police on every street corner. And that's something that has guided me in my years in policing. There's a slow adaptation of police HR models to accommodate emerging technological needs. And something interesting you might have read yesterday, the RCMP came out and said that they want to start hiring accountants, mathematicians, coders, individuals who have experience in online crimes without sending them through the RCMP Training Academy in Regina. Basically have them investigate, give them training, don't necessarily have to give them a gun, or peace officer status, which is something that is long overdue in policing. And then there's the issue of, remember talking about perceptions, persistent fears of terrorist threats, where technology is used to enhance weapons of mass disruption. So I interrupt this discussion to tell you something that you brutally know, but you may be in denial of. And that's we're all going to die. All of us. Simple as that. And if we take a look at this room, myself and this group, right from the middle on over, we're going to die of the first part, heart and circulatory disorders. About three rows of tables over here, you folks are going to die of, is it respiratory disorders? Yes. And then another row of tables of cancers, and the rest is up there. Where does terrorism lie in there? It's a subset of war. And yet, how much money, time, effort do we spend in policing and in security on the whole issue around terrorism? Let's take a look at the numbers that are there. And this is from, I think, 2015. Islamic jihadist immigrants responsible for the deaths of 2 individuals. Far right-wing terrorists, 5. Armed toddlers, 21. I don't know if you heard those stories. Mom has a gun in her bag. She puts it in the back seat right beside Junior, who is strapped into a car seat. He reaches down, picks it up, shoots the mother through the back. That happens. Lawnmowers, 69. It happened to us here in Halifax 2 years ago. Individual was on a ride-on tractor. He was on a slanted hill, lost control, ended up rolling down and killing him. And being hit by a bus, and everything there, being shot by another American. Opioids and other drug overdoses in the U.S. in 2016 killed between 56 and 60,000 people. Gun deaths, homicides, suicides, accidents, 36,000. And just beneath that is car accidents, 35,000. That's remained consistent or constant ever since the U.S. has been tracking those deaths since 1974. Something that is really at the forefront of public discussion, okay, is the whole issue of next-gen 911. Okay. Who here thinks that they can send a text or a video to 911? There's a lot of people out there in the public, you folks know better, but there's a lot of people out there in the public who think that they can do that. There's only one place in North America right now, and that's in Fayette County in Georgia. They have real-time text, video, and geodetic routing of calls. In Canada, the CRTC has mandated that we go to the next generation 911 to be text capable by the end of 2020, and only in 2024 and beyond that we'd be able to send images, videos, and additional data. And a lot of that has to do with the legacy systems that are in place and the amount of time it's going to take for us to make the transition to an IP-based multimedia capable system. So lots of changes as well in our society that we have to deal with. Within policing and outside of policing. Social media. Huge, huge challenges. And you see this, and I think many of us, if not all of us, are involved in some way or another. People tend to mistake empiricism for a flood of data. And we deal with those challenges on a regular basis. You folks know the key concepts in cybersecurity and the importance of that. For us, the biggest challenge is that business continuity. But there's a conflict that we also have to be alive to. And that's the whole issue around security and privacy. You know that 7 of the world's top 10 most valuable companies by market capitalization are technology firms. Except for Apple and Microsoft, Those other companies are all built on a foundation of tying data to human beings. That means that people's data is valuable, or are valuable, excuse me. People's data can be commodified, as Ms. Zuloff has indicated, and yet few people have truly changed their online behavior. Okay? Partly that because it's time consuming. Okay? Even those people know what it's like. How often you change your password? How many passwords do you have? Okay? In preparing for this, I took a look and I counted all, and I'm sure I didn't get them all, the passwords that I have. 57 different passwords. Well, are they really different? We'll have to see. Threats today, you folks are well aware of them. My time is running short here. Okay? Obviously, with the federal election looming right now, there's the issue of foreign meddling in our elections. We had a recent high-profile case several years ago of a young girl who had committed suicide. And Anonymous was involved in it. We ended up tracking Anonymous to a server in Russia. And this is where we have to be very aware of what one author has spoken about as being cognitive warfare. As data becomes richer, information will be increasingly used to influence our behavior. And what facilitates this? Well, you folks know this: poor apps in cybersecurity, poor staff awareness, inside agents, criminal market, and for us, specific to policing, it's the cultural inertia of police services and the justice system towards technological changes. Thomas Hoare Dixon, I think he's still at Waterloo, okay, wrote in his book, The Ingenuity Gap. The red line talks about the complexity of the problems that we have, and the blue line talks about our ability to answer those challenges. And in policing, our biggest concern is going dark. So just what are we doing? Well, you may be aware of the Five Eyes, and this is a historical response to those challenges. Five Eyes, which is an Anglophone conglomerate of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, United Kingdom, and the United States, okay, who work together to deal with the challenges that are out there. They have recognized that their single most important priority, okay, is thwarting the encryption of terrorist messaging. There's a lot of other priorities out there, but that's recognized as number one. Obviously, from the private sector, okay, you have initiatives that are out there. Now, of course, not everybody can afford Cyber Tactical Operations Center, which travels from U.S. city to city, simulating the experience of fallen victims of cyber attack. And of course, locally, we're much more limited than that. So I want to leave you with what we need to do in policing. We need to align our strategy and funding, as the one counselor who voted against my budget properly alluded to. We need to attract, train, and retain a capable workforce with the requisite technological acumen, skills, and equipment. And this is one thing that we've done. We decided to look at the future. That's why I introduced the future earlier on with these young people here. We recently started the Halifax Regional Police Foundation. I believe Andrew will be talking a bit about that, where we put money towards Hacker High School and proper eyeline hygiene for young kids, exposing them to the possibility of working in the area of informatics. We need to have the right updated and updatable technology, especially updatable technology. We need to leverage local, national, international investigative capability, and we need to create agile operating models that allow for police to operate effectively and especially legally. And we need to have a consistently updated legislative and judicial structure. A good example is the Council of Europe's Convention on Cybercrime, CETS 185, also known as the Budapest Convention, that sets down the standards that signatory countries, including Canada, adhere to. And these are significant challenges that need to be overcome for us to be able to deal with the challenges that we have before us, and especially those unknown unknowns that we most certainly will have to deal with that. So my takeaway, nothing new. You recognize, we all recognize the complexity that's out there. We have not adjusted to that complexity yet in policing or in the judiciary. And we need to have a larger, more strategic debate, not looking for simple solutions to complex issues, but well thought out and well-financed solutions that are there. And so, to answer the first question that was on my first slide, I can tell you, with thanks to Alfred E. Newman, that yes, I am worried, and I'm concerned. And that, unfortunately, is the reality that we have in policing today. Thank you.
Chief Blais, on behalf of the Atlantic Security Conference and our community, I'd like to award you with our challenge coin and say thank you very much for your time and your effort and sharing your stories with our attendees today, but also thank you for your guidance, leadership, and for the support of our community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Clifford is here. Would you like me to call him?
Who?
Clifford is here.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great, yeah.
Just one housekeeping item. Chief alluded to it, and he talked about the Halifax Regional Police Foundation through his vision and strategy. We have engaged the community. The formation of the Halifax Regional Police Foundation has been established. We have a number of donors that have sponsored some monies that Halifax Regional Police will partner with the Take Action Society, which is a group of young individuals. And we are going to partner with the not-for-profit global organization called Hacker High School. And I call upon you, members of my community and my peers, now's the time to act. This is where we can start to share our expertise and knowledge and mentor the young people. I know that Sandra Sarek, I saw the tweet, I don't know if she's here, she called out saying Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and PEI are very much underrepresented in the Cyber Titans program. I call upon all of you to help me change that. And if Clifford Stoll is present, please come up. Come on up, Clifford. Yeah, you should.
So you don't have any tomatoes, do you? So Clifford spoke not only in his video, the call to learn, come on up, as well as yesterday, he spoke about the unfortunate story, which was actually an enlightening story for him, as well as for us, of being chased at, I think it was SUNY Buffalo, by a police officer. And of course, you will appreciate myself as being a police officer. I'm just thinking, my God, it was another generation, another country, but nonetheless, it taints policing overall. So I want to be able to correct a wrong that was done at that time. And instead of giving to Clifford a hit across the head, I think it was with a rifle butt, I want to be able to present to him the challenge coin from Halifax Regional Police. And on behalf of the employees who are here, as well as all the employees who are not here, I want to say thank you for your contributions. And hopefully this will kind of right the wrong of some 30, 40, 50 years ago. So thank you.